Hello and welcome to the newest episode of Before They Knew Better, the podcast from DIY Magazine. My name is Lisa Wright and here is my co-host and producer Giles Bidder.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Giles. Today we have a very special guest on the podcast. Normally I would do some preamble to sort of explain their background, maybe what they've been up to, but I don't think anyone listening to this needs any introduction to Graham Coxon. One of the most legendary guitarists this country has ever seen, a quarter of Blur, a half of The Wave, his new band with Rosella Dougal, just a legend, just a music legend, a general legend. So we were very excited to have Graham on the podcast, where we asked him to bring in a photo, an object, and a song from his youth and teenage years, as we ask everyone on this podcast, over a, let's be honest, quite a bad internet connection. So let's forgive if any of that goes a bit crackly, but you know, Graham Coxon, innit? He just sort of let his internet do what it wants. But over this connection, he gave us some, I think listening back to him talking about kind of mucking about with Damon in Colchester back in the day, about some early Blur gigs, basically just loads of stuff that as a big old nerd of that band, which I can fully class myself as, and I'm sure many of you can too, were a treat to hear, as well as a Blur documentary, which is just about to come out. It's called To The End. I've seen it. It's bloody great. That is coming to cinemas from July 19th. The Wave have a new track out. It's called City Lights. That's also fabulous. And I believe that I am allowed to say that there is more coming along those lines from The Wave very soon. Graham's basically just got a lot of cool shit going on, as he always has, as he has done for the last sort of 30 years consistently, because he's bloody Graham Coxon. So without further ado, this is the newest episode of Before They Knew Better with DIY Magazine and the one and only Graham Coxon. Is this a home recording studio that we have found you in? Or like you've got loads of sort of little knickknacks going on around the side?
Oh yeah, you can. There's guitars, weird crap, some pictures there. When I was a teenager.
Nice. Okay, which we will be going into.
This is a home recording. This is where Rose and I'd only just moved into this house, kind of a few days before Rose and I started working on that first record. So this is where we've made or kicked off making 2 albums.
2 albums, got a small child running around the house now. I feel like if I asked my friends who were like young parents to also make 2 albums in the time that they had done that, they would probably just tell me to fuck off. So I don't really know how are you balancing these things?
I actually have no idea how we managed that. Basically, we did it the same way we did the first record, which was we had to get 2 or 3 times a week someone to look after the baby so we could work. That's sort of what you have to do. I'll grab every spare moment I could to be kicking some ideas off, so there was plenty to look at. And the odd day where Rose could spend a few hours in here and she'd get something together, like You Saw started with Rose kicking some ideas around. So that song You Saw, and so you just sort of have to do what you can. I mean, I'm used to working in a more 10 to 4, 10 to 5 every day. I mean, I got into that working mode when I was doing soundtracks, and I had no choice because people wanted stuff all the time. But just very lucky that, obviously there's tons more stuff that didn't really work, and so we were lucky that we got an album and a bit's worth of stuff together in that time. The work with Blur was kind of in a very intensive week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know. And we had to work pretty fast there.
Yeah.
With James, we had sort of 4 weeks, I suppose, working weeks. So 20 days with James and then mixing. So we didn't have a lot of time, but I like to be very prepared and organised. maybe I'm a bit OCD. I'm trying to figure out if I'm a bit OCD, but I think I'm a bloke who, like lots of blokes, as they get older, they get more fussy. And it may not be OCD. It might just be that I'm getting old. Having things organised, being prepared, anxiety levels rising if things are not prepared. So as a person, I'm sort of pretty well organised. Although my cars are always dirty.
What's the worst thing that's sort of in the footwell of your car at the moment?
No, I won't put up with that. No, but on the outside, they're usually dirty.
So, I mean, we were sort of, obviously this podcast is about being young. Like, do you think that if you're saying that you're getting fustier with age, would you say that you were always a sort of like prepared man? Like, how do you think that has developed over time?
Oh, I don't think I was particularly when I was younger. But it comes with, I suppose, experiencing what it's like over and over again to be ill-prepared and not organised, which sometimes can be extremely humiliating and sort of and sort of stressful. And I prefer to not feel humiliation and stress. So, even if I go into a hotel now, I organise everything. I make sure that I know where everything is at all times. And I got so many things stolen from dressing rooms, etc. The thing is about being organised is this: you actually need on hand is there the files within a digital song is organised enough for you to not be having to be listening to crap rubbish all the time, and that it's just basic. It's sort of housekeeping. It's very, very boring.
So I guess if we're transporting back to Colchester in the 80s, the early 80s. Sax was your first instrument before guitar and before you sort of became like that guy in the band, right? Like, how did you get into playing sax? What was like the sort of, did you want to be like a kind of orchestra man or like a brass band man before you wanted to be like in bands?
Before sax, drum kits, but I learned sax because I kind of liked it. I did my O level was about saxophone, my O-level music section. So I went all over the place listening to things from Andrew Gold to things like Paul Gonsalves to things like I didn't really like the pop music. There was things like Tom Hark by the Piranha. It wasn't exactly pop music, but then you had Spandau Ballet. So I was kind of pretty much an alternative sort of beast by that time. But later on in the 80s, I started to there was the odd single in the 80s by David Bowie, like Blue Jean, and then later on, things like the Van Gogh Generator. And
is that the sort of instrument, if you're playing it as a kid around that time, where it would be seen as like a cool thing to play? Or is that the sort of instrument where if you're lugging it on the bus at school, then you get mocked?
It's lucky I could walk to school, so I didn't need that problem. No, Damon had more of a problem with that violin case, and he had to go on the bus and really sort of suffered for that. No, the sax was kind of reasonably a cool thing, but playing the sax at school was the thing that made Damon come up to me, say, "You've got a sax. Play sax. I've got this song. I want a saxophone solo on it." And so that's when we started to actually. That's when we first did it together.
That was pre-Blur days, different name band, completely different sort of like style and stuff. Like, what was the music that you were playing then?
What, Damon and I?
Yeah. When you were on the sax.
It was just one song. I mean, what was it there? I mean, that's quite a romantic sort of tune, but it was a good melody. Words were sort of softly and cliched, but the melody was good, and had an idea for what I could do on the saxophone. But we put too many effects on it, really. It wasn't purely sort of saxophone. It had sort of strange, sort of something that made it sound odd.
I am also from Colchester, and I feel like when I grew up, it was very much sort of like I think the fact that you guys had come from there had sort of given the music scene a bit of a, I don't know, it felt like there was, that thing where if you see someone from your town doing it, then it kind of gives people like the idea that they can do something. So I think that really injected a lot of sort of excitement into kids, into like making bands and doing stuff. But like, how was it when you were growing up?
Well, there was a few groups that I thought were fantastic in Colchester at the time. They wouldn't have got anywhere, but that doesn't mean they were bad.
Yeah.
It was a bit hippie and pretty alternative at times. Oh, Lost Connections, that was the band. And they had a song called Degar Dancer, or Diga Dancer, and among other things. And they had a cassette album that I used to listen to a lot. And that was extremely good music. My music wasn't just my only life at that point, although it had a lot to do with it. You know, I was an art school person and I was just a teenager, so there wasn't an awful lot I could get up to.
There's a really nice scene in the film where there's snapshots of you and Damon as part of the theatre group. Those are some really nice photos.
Yeah, they were they What a Lovely War? School production, probably.
Yeah, it's Damon being very confident on stage, and like, where would you, I mean, were you also doing, you weren't on stage in those photos, right?
It depends what photos you're talking about, because there was Oh What a Lovely War, where we're dressed as sort of like pyro clowns, which everybody, that's how the production is made. Probably Orpheus in the Underworld as well, where I played Styx. Damon played Zeus. He was a lot more confident than me.
Did you find like being on stage at that point, even though you weren't like super confident man, like felt like quite a natural place to be?
Yeah, I kind of liked the thrill of it. I'd been in Cub Scout gang shows and I'd been in plays at junior school. I did have a sort of, still do really, I suppose, designs on sort of acting. You know, when I was a kid, I ever wanted to be, a footballer, an actor, or write novels. And then later on, it became obvious that I was probably going to be an artist or a musician. But I still don't know whether they're the best. I'm the best at that than anything else I could have been. I don't know whether I could have been a better actor.
Did you ever have like sort of designs on a certain, like, you know, a serious...
Serious, sort of like spy dramas. Well, in the late 70s, I got very into films like The Ipcress File and stuff that I couldn't fully understand, but that were sort of stylish and mysterious, and, you know, the shoes made a good, nice sound on the pavement. You know, it was, and I used to really want that. I remember going out after watching The Ipcress File and wanting my shoes to sound like they did. Yeah, there's a really kind of an interesting fight between Harry Palmer and this minder, the minder of this bloke who has been parking illegally a lot. And there's a sort of scuffle, and the sort of fight is actually quite quiet, but the sound of the shoes is quite loud. And I'm just being disappointed that my Wellingtons didn't really make that same sort of sound when I went out. But eventually, in the mid 80s, I used to wear these boots for a while called dealer boots, and they had what we called segs, SEGS. It's or a Blakey or a quarter tip. I don't know.
I don't know what the words you're saying are.
It's a piece of metal that is in the heel of your shoe, right at the back where your heel would initially hit the pavement. So a little bit over to the right on the right hand heel, and a little bit over to the left on the left hand heel, and it makes a nice click. And so the dealer boots were important to me because they were quite expensive actually at the time, and I didn't used to get very expensive clothing. I had the odd thing that was kind of I used to like to have, but those dealer boots were quite expensive, and they had leather soles, so they'd make that noise. And I still really like that noise. I've still got dealer boots with the same sort of quarter tip or Blakey in the back. No one makes that noise anymore. Everybody's soles are soft these days, which is a bit disappointing, and because everyone wears sort of comfortable shoes and trainers, so you don't hear that noise much anymore.
Are you a secret athleisure in your spare time? No.
Not really trained. I mean, I've got trainers, but I find them a little bit... I mean, I wear trainers at the gym, but they're not really trainers. They're more like things that can allow you to exercise.
I just quite like the idea of you wearing like full brogues on a treadmill.
I mean, I don't really go on treadmills. I don't wear running shoes. I wear shoes that's to do with gym stuff rather than sort of running. I find running kind of boring. It is boring, isn't it?
It is. The elliptical is all right though, because it's sort of half running, half fighting.
Oh, the sort of cross trainer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a bit of that, but mostly it's sort of weights and things at the moment.
A lot of bits in the new Blur doc that's coming out that was sort of like, you know, how are we going to have the stamina to do these shows? I think at one point you sort of said that you fully don't expect yourself to kind of make it to the end of the tour in one piece without kind of keeling over. Like, was it an endurance test doing, like, I mean, I guess Wembley's what, 2 hours? That's long.
2 hours is long, but I think that when you're rehearsing, that is sort of like 6 hours. So you can sometimes think, Jesus Christ, this is hurting, especially if you're not your fingers and stuff are not particularly used to it. You know, you can just panic that you're not quite up to scratch. But with everything else in a 2 hour show, yes, it is long and it's kind of quite exhausting, and the emotional ups and downs are quite big and it's intense work. So it wasn't really the shows that I thought were going to be particularly exhausting, although they sort of are. It's far more exhausting work, you know. It's not like we're down a pit, but you know, that did seem, as the schedule stretched out over that year, I did think, how are us four going to kind of get through this? And you know, there were some injuries, you know, we'd all fucked our knee up at some point. I probably messed mine up by just running around on all fours in the front room, you know, with a baby, or, you know, every morning for 3 hours, and just not taking into account my actual age, which I sort of rarely do. I still carry on like I'm 25, basically, with my physicality, and sometimes I get caught out, like, you know, a torn ligament or something like that. But I had one. Damon's knees. He's always having ups and downs with his knees, and Dave's knees. So we all had caught a little bit of an injury, but nothing terrible, thank God.
Great to see you getting into it. There's a lot of shots of you falling over backwards, a lot of jump shots in this new film.
Yeah.
You're looking good.
Well, I can't quite help myself, and I don't think I'm quite getting the height I used to. But there was a photo of me rolling over, and I don't know, on some social media thing, and there was a comment, it's nice to see the old man having fun. Good on him. And I'm like, oh, shit. I watched Live Aid and Pete Townsend was rolling around on the floor, but I don't think he was as old as then as I am now. So I don't know.
You have sent us a photo, and I mean, like, how old do you think you are in this picture?
This one?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I took that. There's a couple more of these where I've got the thing in my hand, and they're sort of self-portraits. And my friend Debbie could have taken that. I'm 17 now. Just joined the North Essex School of Art. So I think that's my first photography class.
Did you have full designs on just going down the art path at that time rather than music path?
I didn't really know. I've never planned out my life. Like I've said in my book, drawing, expressed myself, how I expressed my feelings, and then into people's music was how I got some sort of an idea of how the outside world felt.
Like, were you quite a sort of shy guy, or were you kind of coming out of your shell by then? Like, what was your sort of, like, where did you fit into the spectrum of people in your classes?
I was serious and sort of outspoken. I was well educated. I'd educated myself quite a lot with art. Yeah, I spent all my pocket money on art books. I had a really good idea about the artists I really, really liked, and I was just up for experiencing whatever. Be etching, printmaking, sculpture, wood sculpture, whatever sort of sculpture. There were people who were sort of graphic artists, commercial artists, or there was model makers and things like that. And what they did was great, but they had the patience to do that. especially after looking at pictures by Frank Auerbach, opposite end of the spectrum for me. The music too, I think, reflected my interest in things that were a little more abstract or out there or experimental. Maybe that's growing up on the Beatles. I don't know.
When you think about being 17, like you were just saying then about kind of feeling quite inexperienced in life, like I think, now you sort of look at kids and 17-year-olds look like sort of mini adults, and everyone does seem very, like, did that feel like quite an innocent period, even though you were kind of, presumably maybe going to the pub, going and doing bits, like how do you remember the feeling of being 17?
It was really exciting. I don't really know. It was a lot more innocent. I think it was for people now, probably. But then again, there was things in Colchester when I was that age you really had to look out for. There was a difference. There was no social media then, of course. There was no mobile phones. There was, a public telephone. There was, riding on buses or walking or, but the thing is in Colchester, which you don't get so much now, is that you really had to be careful about which pub you went into. Which you do get that now, but not to the extent as you do maybe in the 80s if you kind of look a bit different like I did. I mean, I look kind of pretty regular. It's almost like an army haircut I've got there. So, but I still wouldn't. I don't think I would have been able to go into a squatty pub into what I was wearing with what I was wearing. Okay, it's just a jumper and a shirt, but I'd have an old tweed jacket on that might be stinking of turps, and some old corduroy trousers and some pigskin hush puppies, probably splashed with oil paint. So they're taken kindly to me going in one of their pubs. And then there was the smart casuals, which wouldn't have probably liked it either. So there was a few pubs that only people like me could go in. And it was like all the alternative would be in them. So, people like art students, and you'd have the hardcore sort of punks, normal punks, witches, goths. You'd sort of the whole kind of other style of people, apart from mainstream, were limited to only a handful of pubs.
Did you end up sort of meeting anyone in those things where it would become? I mean, I guess obviously you were saying about meeting bandmates and things, but did that feel like a proper sort of hotspot for just finding your people?
Within that group of alternative people, that there were subgroups. So there was of people in the corner who were like New Model Army fans. Would be like, we don't really want to look at them wrong. Be people that Napalm Death and all those sort of people, and Dead Kennedys and all that sort of thing. And then there were sort of more gentle alternative people, some actually people that like were kind of indie but grammar school. And there was girls' school people like my friends Sue and Kristen, and we'd all sort of congregate in the same, either in the Cups or sometimes in Tilly's, the tea room in Colchester, which I don't know whether it's still there. Crow Street? I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Actually. No, the old cinema. You still had to sort of watch it, and there was lots of fights within those groups anyway.
Were you a fighty person? Would you get in a scrap?
No, I would just sort of be tweed jacket, Smiths, and sort of jeans or peasants, There were some other good people knocking around, but really I kept myself to myself at the art school. But mostly that was the start of a sort of more of a social life, I suppose, where the student union had more of a pull really than my studio space. The idea of having brown ales and a pizza at lunchtime, and then going back and doing some painting. Although I was, in my year there was some serious people who was very serious about work, and I was kind of serious. I was also starting to work then with Damon a bit musically, and drafting in people like Alex on bass, who lived below me, now halls of residence, which is still there actually on the road surrounding Myatt's Field in Camberwell, Stanard Hall. It's still there.
I mean, I guess there was some really nice footage again in that documentary of like you going back to Stanway and sort of revisiting those spaces. Like, are you in quite a sort of, would you call yourself quite a nostalgic person? Like just walking down those roads and seeing, you know, the place where you first did that or played that or, you know, had those formative memories. Are you someone who kind of likes to wander down those little avenues?
I am a little bit, but all of those places at our school have been destroyed. Not relive anything there. It was like a completely different place. But yeah, I do. It was interesting seeing Stanard Hall. You just take it so for granted when you're young. You know, youth is wasted on the young. And why should you plan anything about your life when you're 18, 19? You know, this is great. You're living really in the moment and being day to day. You might be absolutely skint, but you still eat something. And managing to drink something, no one really gives you the sort of advice that you really need. And you know, that's sort of what I go into in my book, who to watch out for. Not everyone is going to be on your side in life, and there's some people that actually are going to be your enemy, and you may not even know it. You know, a lot of that kind of stuff.
So the objects that you brought in is a homemade marble maze. Describe this maze for us.
It's so good, this maze, that no one could ever get the marble out the other hole, apart from myself. But it just leads you to a very, very long... It's the easiest way to go is down a very long kind of route, which is hard to get back out of. And the way that you should be going is kind of a difficult course. So and you can't see the maze inside. So I chose that object because it's sort of I made it, and my life has been kind of quite like it. I've gone down very, very long avenues that have been extremely difficult to get out of, and it seemed like the right choices and the right directions for me, really, really hard for me to find. So that's kind of interesting. I haven't got a marble. I mean, I could always do it because I knew where the tricky bit was. But I tried it for so long and I don't have any marbles, which makes me a bad father.
He's lost his marbles and he's got
I've lost my marbles.
Way down the metaphorical marble maze of life.
And also it made me really enjoy woodworking. So, you know, and later on I did a lot of wood sculpture and handy with stuff like that. You know, I think people get the impression of me that I'm some sort of feckless idiot, but I'm actually pretty good at making things, fixing things, and do all of that kind of. But that's because of a funny idea of what I could ask of other people. So I had to sort of didn't want people's help, so I had to become self-reliant. And this is, you know, started well before YouTube. Hey man, if you've got a problem, there's loads of you telling you how to do it. Well, not then, I mean, not so much. So you kind of learn but from your mistakes. If you're trying to change a light fitting, haven't turned the fuses off, then start fiddling with screwdrivers on live electric and wires and stuff.
Have you ever accidentally blown yourself up a little bit?
Not really, just cuts, and I'm not that stupid. Of course, we all do stupid things. Like, there was a really sticky sash window at my place in Camden, and I climbed onto the radiator, climbed up, and just sort of hung off it, which was a really silly thing to do because it came unstuck, and I went down very heavily with and my shins went straight into the radiator.
What?
And you know, there's this split second sometimes before the pain really kicks in. And I remember in that split second, I jumped on the bed and held my shins, just going. It was and all my skin had been scraped off my shins. So yeah, you live and learn. But then squatters over it. It's actually called Dover House. No, it'll be still there. It'll still be there. That was around Myatt's Field as well, not just up the road from Stanard, where I stayed. And I don't know, for some reason, squatters took it over, and there were proper squatters, proper sort of early rave kind of traveller sort of, I suppose what they call dog on string type of people. Hippie, proper community hippie kind of traveller types, and they took it over. And for a while, I lived in one of those flats. It was a beautiful building. So yeah.
Was there this element of danger when you're doing that, where you kind of feel like you might get busted by the police at any point, or?
Yeah, there was, but they were kind of disrespectful to that house, and quite often wardrobes were being thrown out of windows at the top of the house onto the street and stuff like this. So you sort of had to watch it, and the basement had all been painted in fluorescent, insane paint and with mad big faces on, and that's where they used to sort of have raves and stuff like that. But mostly they were fine. Yeah, so there was lots of different flats within there.
Would you be in with the ravers? Would you rave? Have you raved? Did you rave?
No, I didn't rave. I went down and had a look. No, I just had other things going on. I was, by that point, I'm pretty sure that I was rehearsing with Damon and Alex and Dave. That sort of the early days of Seymour had started. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of the times I would maybe have been in New Cross or, other friends in Camberwell. So for a while I sort of lived in Dover House, but it wasn't for long. I'm not quite sure what happened next. I think that was when I started seeing Jane, and so Jane and I think, got a flat in Lewisham after that. Mm. And so that was definitely when I was living in Lewisham. I was travelling to Hackney Road to go to the premises to rehearse with the boys, and actually had started making recordings by then. Yeah, definitely. I remember recording Mr. Briggs, that early Blur B-side, and taking it back to my flat in Lewisham and playing it to Jane and going, cool, I really like this. And she's saying it's a bit of a Pink Floyd rip-off. She was quite right. So.
Do you remember, like, in those sort of very early, I mean, I guess, like, doing the shows recently, having this film out is probably, seeing a lot of old footage and stuff like that. Like, was there any stuff that you got shown or that you remember that sort of like sparked off any particularly treasured memories of those like very first days before you knew what it was going to turn into?
I think going back to the Arts Centre was the biggest sort of trigger. That word didn't really exist in the way it does now in those days, trigger. I think it was, either a horse or something that was attached to a gun. But going back there was quite amazing. I used to really love going to the Arts Centre. And actually Mick from the Curious Band runs that place now. So it was good to see him. And it was good to see the big graveyard that surrounds that place, which is now fenced off, which was a shame, because that's where lots of punks and goths and all of that lot used to sit around drinking great big 2-litre bottles of cider and stuff. But no longer, they're not really allowed to do that anymore. But being in that building, I really liked, because I had a lot of really good nights in that place. I was a teenager.
Did you play that as like an early Blur gig at the Arts Centre, or was that?
No, we'd never played there. I'd done gigs there with other people. Mm-hmm. I was a sort of a sit-in drummer sometimes. I sat in on the drums for a band called Schrodinger's Cat, which I think only formed for one gig. And then there was Curious Band. There was Idle Vice, which was Dave's band. Hazel Dean and the Carpenters from Hell. That was one of my main bands. I played there a few times with them. And that was Mike Morris, my friend Jeremy Stone and Jason Whitaker. There was all sorts of people making all kinds of fun music. So that was always a good time.
Also, I just think the one thing that I'm picking up in this whole conversation is that you've got like a nuts level of memory. Like the amount that you can just sort of like rattle off like things from 40 odd years ago is like genuinely quite, I struggle to remember people that I went to school
Yeah,
with.
I remember a lot from that because there wasn't an awful lot of repetition, I suppose. Every event stuck out as being sort of special. Whereas the last 20 years maybe
Just
was a little
one.
more difficult. I've been in situations where I feel like I haven't fully experienced, I don't know, it's difficult to explain, where things can become so repetitious that you don't know the difference between one day or the other when you look back, or you feel like you've been living underwater, which is sort of, I feel like, for quite a long time, I felt like I wasn't really experiencing myself and firing on all cylinders, and that I was sort of, to a certain extent, living underwater and feeling sort of quite isolated from a lot of experiences and not going out an awful lot. So, so my memories of that sort of time, it's not quite, I mean, it's just grey. But before that, it was so colourful, really, and everything was so exciting, that everything was so eventful. So I suppose those events sort of stand out, and that's what got me when I went back to the arts centre, because it just brought all that back, and it brought back some memories of beautiful friends, some of them who aren't alive anymore, and so it was an emotional situation for me. Yeah.
There's an interesting kind of paradox between the Graham that, you know, after a couple of beers will want to go back and paint, maybe make art in solitude, and like a totally social, explosive, colourful life. There's a kind of paradox between them.
Yeah, well, I was kind of both things, but alcohol allowed me to be that socially. You know, without a couple of Abbott ales, I'm not sure that I could really be quite that person. I was always pretty shy, but I was still quite sociable. So I used to love going out and seeing people, you know, and even having a dance, you know, or you know, that was my favourite thing.
Would that be your tipple of choice back in the day?
Colchester actually luckily had quite a lot of Green King pubs, and so that used to be what I used to quite like, I think. Yeah. And my friend Noah's dad, he used to drink Abbott and St Edmund, which is strengthy stuff. That's for proper blokes. So you have half a pint of Abbott ale, and then you have a bottle of St Edmund, which is stronger. You sort of pour it in the Abbott. And it's nice. It's good stuff.
Okay.
But that's not the sort of thing you can drink down the arts centre, really. I probably had very, very squashy plastic glasses full of crappy lager there.
And would you have seen, I mean, you mentioned King Crimson before, but that was, say, the track that you picked, Ladies of the Road. Is that someone, I mean, like, is that an era where you would have been kind of watching them in these venues at that time?
No, not really. I had a cassette for a while, and this is slightly naughty probably, but I think a friend of mine had just stuck a few things on it, and he'd put To Mark Everywhere, which is a Robert Wyatt, really strange Robert Wyatt track from The End of an Ear, that album. Mm-hmm. And there was God's Song by Robert Wyatt. What else? And then there was Ladies of the Road by King Crimson, which which blew my mind, actually. I still find it one of the most mind-blowing songs ever. It's the weirdest song. But for somebody who liked the Beatles, there's an easy way in to that song, because there are some parts of it that are very Beatley. You know, there's mellotrons going backwards, and there's some pretty harmonies, but the rest of it is very not difficult to listen to, but like it's quite a challenge. It's quite discordant, although it's almost like a blues. But then I think there's Bill Bruford doing this incredible, and it's rhythmically very strange. And that cassette, I think, got eaten up or lost. And I completely forgot about that song until over 20 years later, where it suddenly came up. It wouldn't have been Spotify or anything like that, I don't think. I'm not quite sure how it came up, but the first sort of few spidery guitar notes of the introduction, I was just like, oh my God, I know this song. And sort of relived being that age completely. I know that music sort of transports you, but to not hear a song since you're in your late teenage and then sort of hear it again in your sort of late 20s was like, whoa, that's like, it was really mind-blowing, and I've just been obsessed with the song ever since. I think it's like one of those songs that I'm going to always be fully obsessed with, along with, it's just got one of my favorite guitar solos in it. It's got the most filthy sort of tenor sax playing in it. It's kind of got everything. It's got, and the lyrics are a bit rude, I suppose, but it's got that sort of rhythmic sophistication. I can never quite follow it. It always catches me out, which is great. So I never get bored of listening to it.
I mean, that seems like all of your kind of describing the hallmarks of your own music. I think like it's very easy to sort of transpose a lot of those things into like obvious influences. But
I just like stuff that's kind of fun to listen to. You know, I mean, everyone sort of had Court of the Crimson King. You know, that was a given. And for an album released in 1969, that's like pretty insane. I suppose I just must have got Islands by King Crimson at some point, and then that came on, and I was like, bloody hell, marvelous, yeah. Because I could have just sat listening to the Court of the Crimson King for the rest of my life, maybe, and I'm always a bit lazy in that way. I could have been quite happy with that, but something made me buy some other King Crimson albums. And you know, and then suddenly I was hearing Ladies of the Road again for the first time in, you know, actually probably 30 years. So it was kind of mad. Yeah.
There's something weird about, like, especially when you rediscover something from that sort of teenage time, and you'll probably remember every like lyric or like chord pattern, because like your brain is just so sort of malleable and smushy at that point that like those things will just never, like I sometimes will listen back, you know, something will come on from like 20 years ago and I still remember every word, and I just think it's bonkers that it's just sort of altered your mind chemistry in a way where I think those like little synapses that have fused together to remember that song, that's just like permanent in there till I die.
Even the stuff that I didn't particularly like a lot, that was on the radio all the time, you know, still know it inside out. It's very odd. If I hadn't have got into Van de Graaff Generator when I was 17, 18 and someone was to play it for me now, I'd be a bit like, whoa, you know. But the things that you discover in your late teens or throughout your childhood, they just stay there. And it's like, which is why, I don't know, What Goes On by the Velvet Underground might be my favorite Velvet Underground song. It's not any of the more noisier, difficult stuff, perhaps. But it's also that I got very quickly bored with some music, with some bands, when I was that age as well. You know, I had my 2 months listening to The Doors very heavily, and then I couldn't listen to them again, which is kind of weird because I do like one or two of the songs, but I just couldn't be doing with it anymore.
We are running out of time, but we've been asking everyone that does these chats, just as a nice little way to wrap up, that what do you think, you know, the 17-year-old Graham in that photo at art school, what do you think he would be most proud of that has come to pass in the years since then?
Ooh. I don't know, maybe at the age of 55 or 54, whenever it was, doing Wembley Stadium for 2 nights. I mean, that's not bad. Whether that would have been that important to my 17-year-old self, I'm not sure. Or that there would be a portrait of me up in the National Portrait Gallery. That's kind of cool.
Still doing roly-polies at Wembley at 54?
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of surprised and proud of the fact that I'm this age and still making, I think, pretty much my favorite music I've ever made in my life, and so that's kind of nice. I don't know whether he'd understand just how nice that is for me at this age. That's why he would have had a little bit more advice about a few things than he did get if I had had my way. But oh well.
He turned out all right. That was Graham Coxon on the newest episode of Before They Knew Better. Huge thanks to Graham for joining us. Graham, doesn't get much better than Graham Coxon, does it? For this guy, anyway. For me, it does not get better. Thank you to Graham. Thank you for listening. Why not go back and dig into some old episodes of Before They Knew Better if you liked this one. We are coming to the end of series 2. We've had a big old series with the likes of Serge from Kasabian, Kate Nash, Lauren from Churches, just loads of people. There's a whole series 1 that you can go back and dig into. We have one more episode of this series to come. It is a cracker with another music legend, Carrie Brownstein of Sleater Kinney. So if you give us a subscribe, that will come straight into your podcast inbox next Tuesday morning. And then that is it. That's it for another series of us. But we'll be back in September for series 3 with even more cracking guests. Why not go and give the new issue of DIY Magazine a read? It is our June issue and it is fronted by Glass Animals. Again, another band that I don't think really need an introduction by this stage. Go and give that a read. Go and give us a like and a subscribe and go and listen to some other bits. Or, just do shopping, have a nice day, whatever you want to do really. And we will see you next week for the last episode of series 2 of Before They Knew Better with DIY Magazine.